Now we are post UFC 312. DDP retains and Zhang Weili retains, fighting off their challengers. Now we are here to play matchmaker and to see what's next for them, maybe what's next for their opponents, and some other fighters on UFC 312. I'm not going to talk about every single one, but I'm going to highlight 7 from this past weekend's card. Then I want to see who is their next opponent. Now to start it off with, who is starting out UFC 312, Killian. He knocked out the Indian fighter. I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but I know if you are a fan, you probably saw all the horrible racist edits online. Can't lie, the internet is undefeated. Hilarious shit. I don't condone it, but you gotta laugh at it, man. The internet's the internet. Either way, Killian had an amazing KO in the first round. Whether you think it was an early stoppage or not, I think it was warranted. It could have been continued, but it's not necessarily needed. He did go out pretty flat and then try to go straight for the takedown. And I know that that's kind of a natural motion for someone that gets KO'd. That doesn't mean that it needed to be continued either. So either way, let's see if he can bounce back. I know he had a lot of comments about beating Habib and he's got a chin of stone. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things going on the internet with him and his sound bites. So hope all the best for him. But Killian, I think your next fight needs to be an Austin Hubbard or a Kurt Hollowball. You need to face a crafty veteran and see if you can take that next step. And they're not necessarily reaching for the top 15 right now. I know Kurt Hollowball's coming off a win and Austin is coming off a loss. So either way, they're still kind of not middling veterans, but because I think that they have talent and skill. And let's see if Killian can test his against theirs and see who comes out on top. I think that's a perfect matchup for an up-and-comer and a crafty veteran. Now, Ilia Toporia's brother, Alex Topuria, I'm not going to try to pronounce the name. Either way, I think Alex Toporia's next matchup needs to be either a Kyler Phillips or a Mario Bautista. Give him what the fans want. And what I'm saying by it is we don't need him to be climbing the rankings shortly. He looks very good. He's very patient. He was fighting against a very good prospect in Colby Thickness, Thickenese, whatever, however it's pronounced. I'm sorry. But either way, he fought just like Ilia, very patient, exploded when needed. That amazing suplex showed dominance of the cage. Look, the dude's got talent. We need to see him tested against somebody a little higher up in these rankings that is a little more known as well. They're both on a very, very good record here in the bantamweight division. So let's see how good of a test that is for Alex Topuria here, if that's somebody that they give him next. And I know the fans don't like Mario, so let's see if they feed him to him, Now the exciting heavyweight from the Contender Series, he's undefeated, Taliesin Teixeira. I think one of his next matchups needs to be one of these 3 fighters. One's coming off a loss and 2 have fights booked this week or the next week. And that would be Austin Lane, Walter Walker, and Thomas Peterson, who just came off his loss against the Blob. Let me know what you think of that down below. The heavyweight division is not deep at all. Obviously, we don't want to feed him to the top. He's still figuring out where he is. A win over Justin Tafa, tough guy. Very, very, very tough finish with that knee. But that's not a test for the top of the division at heavyweight. Like, let's be honest. The next person I have for my matchup would be Tatiana Suarez, coming off a tough loss to Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili, what a performance at 312. You put on, I think, even myself, I had you losing, to be honest with you. I really thought Tatiana was going to get it done and figure it out and show a very dominant performance. And it was the opposite. Zhang Weili showed how her defense and what she's learned, how much she's grown as an athlete. So great bout and very, very good defense. And I don't know if you saw, but with these takedowns, Zhang Weili was throwing these nasty elbows in the clinch and in close when Tatiana had her for the defense is very, very punishing. So great work by Zhang Weili. And the next opponent I have for Tatiana Suarez, coming off her loss, her first loss in her professional career, the number 1 ranked in the division who already lost for the belt against Zhang Weili, Jan Verna or Lemos. Now, with me talking about Zhang Weili and such a dominant performance, she's talked about how she doesn't really want to make 115 anymore, and maybe it's best that she moves up And maybe it's best she gets what she wants and the fans get what we want. And she faces Valentina Shevchenko next. I know that that's a lot to ask for somebody. Valentina coming from 135 down to 125, more her natural weight class, obviously. But 115 up to 125. This is possibly the matchup we never got between a third rematch between Amanda and Valentina, which could have been very crazy. Now, who knows? Maybe Amanda returns, but Valentina versus Zhang Wei Li. Now that's interesting. I don't think a lot of people had that on their bingo cards for 2025, but that is a great bout. I would love to see. I mean, #1 pound for pound for the women's MMA. I mean, who is it? Then they go make a trade for Dakota Dachiva and go get somebody to the PFL quick because we need her in the UFC, like, honestly. Then women's MMA is on fire in the UFC. I cannot wait for Dakota to come over to the UFC, to be honest with you. She's exciting. Now the main event and these opponents, what I have for Sean Strickland, I think the story lines up perfectly. I think he needs to go face Israel Adesanya, and I think that might be the exact opponent that Israel Adesanya needs to get out of this slump, to kind of get a little more motivation. After his loss to Imavov, he's talking about taking more time off. I don't think that's best for you, champ, to be honest with you. I know that your legacy, you don't need to come back and win. You can move off into the sunset and we'll never hear from you again, and you're one of the greatest to ever do it. But the fact that you need a little motivation is understood. Like, this could be that motivation. This could be that UFC fight night. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, like, you never know. Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya. The other opponent I would have would be Robert Whittaker. Obviously, there is a storyline there because they've never fought. And Sean Strickland's only talked about Rob in the sense of he only has a blitz whenever he was trying to face Dricus, and he was good. But I think the storyline leads for Sean Strickland versus Izzy because him versus Rob could always be there. I know I'm a big Sean Strickland fan. Obviously, DDP did more than enough to win. In my opinion, I had Sean Strickland winning the first one. And when I watched that one and then I watched it back, I scored it the same. And then watching this one live, to me, the main difference between both bouts was the maybe not output by DDP, but it was more or less he used his legs and he used that head kick a lot more often at the end of his strikes and really clipped Sean Strickland. If you notice, obviously Pereira hit him with the left hook, so that is an opening for him. And then ending with that head kick for DDP was money every round. It was just over the top for him in a very close fight, in my opinion. Other than leading up to the nose break, it was really close. And the head kicks and finishing on those exchanges by DDP really gave him the edge, in my opinion. But as soon as that nose was broken, oh boy, you saw a difference. And if you watch prior, Strickland wasn't really able to get going. It was almost like Dricus just kept putting it on him and just at the end of it with that head kick, it was just consistent. Obviously, a lot of people love to say Sean jabs and teeps and he's goes to war and he doesn't really go to war and doesn't do shit. But when the champ is fighting like that, it's pretty difficult to get going. Obviously, you can see the output difference between Sean Strickland's first fight and this fight. Obviously, big difference. It was almost cut in half. So if you look at it from that perspective, in my opinion, that's why I said what I said. That's why. Because the end of it, DDP would consistently put an exclamation point on their exchanges and Sean Strickland would be left just taking a photo. I'd have to agree with DDP in his post-fight presser. He said that Hamzat needs to be next. What he wants to do, he wants to be known as the greatest fighter at 185. And he knows that Anderson Silva is the GOAT right now. And those are big shoes to fill. And it's not necessarily always about the number of defenses, but about who you did it against, how you did it, in what time frame. All of those variables do matter. They do. I have to agree with him there. But not moving past Hamzat and going to try to face Alex Pereira, depending on how his next performance is against Magomed Ankalaev, I think that also matters as well. You do not want to look past a Khamzat Chimaev who's been grinding his ass off to try to get a 170 or 185 belt. And now he's at 185. It's solely on Dricus. Solely on him. He says he's going to out wrestle him. We'll see how that goes for him. I think it's going to be one of the most exciting bouts this year. Could be International Fight Week. Hell, I think Islam's even aiming for that one against his next opponent if Arman doesn't win his #1 contendership, which we'll talk about the rumors going on with that later. I love that he's not looking past Alex, but he sees that Alex is at 205 and he's not afraid of going up and going after him, especially when he was on Bisping's YouTube channel prior to the fight and he was talking about how he's like 215 going into this, like a couple days before the cut or before the weigh-ins. I mean, that's kind of crazy. What a massive middleweight. And you can see the difference between them. I mean, Bisping, obviously a lot of injuries, a lot of wear and tear, but there's a massive difference between the two in their normal stature. Dricus is a massive 185er and Bisping is not. Dricus has to face Khamzat next and get that monkey off his back. He still has a couple of people coming up in the division like Kaio and Amavov. I think they need to go fight for a #1 contendership and see how that goes. A lot of storylines are to be made after UFC 312. Those are my 7 matchups. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you in the next one.